Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, Mormonism with the Murph, where we do a fair and objective analysis of the church and its truth claims, its history, doctrine, and policy. So we're now on episode 4 of our series on the Book of Mormon witnesses, the witnesses of the gold plates. In the last episode, we had a look at the 8 witnesses. We had a look at, did they actually see the physical gold plates, or was it by a supernatural power? We had a look at some of the quotes there, and we had a look also at some of the secondary witnesses, and we watched a video from Book of Mormon Central just talking about the evidences supporting the witnesses of the gold plates or not. In this video, this is what I'm kind of excited about. It's going to be tackling, did the witnesses see, like literally see the gold plates and the angel, or was it through their spiritual eyes or second sight or some sort of a hallucination? So that's what we'll be diving into in this episode. So let's just jump in. So this comes from a letter for my wife. It says, during the translation process, Joseph was either behind a curtain where the plate sat underneath the cloth in a box in another room. No scribe of the translation process, Oliver Cowdery, Martin Harris, or Emma Smith, was ever allowed to see the plates. Emma only felt the plates through a cloth on the table. Why wouldn't Joseph want anybody to see the plates? It's a good question. If I'm going off the top of my head, I think in the scriptures, there is a scripture that says, like, none shall view the plates that are kept hidden from the world in the Book of Mormon, except to those witnesses who've sort of been appointed to see them. And we know, according to Martin Harris and Oliver Cowdery, that they saw them in a visionary state with the angel and the gold plates. So I guess that would probably be maybe the response to that. So it's maybe a misrepresentation to see that nobody actually saw them. I suppose it depends if you interpret it as just a hallucination, not a literal vision. Um, but he goes on to say that no scribe was allowed to see the plates. Witnesses that did say they saw the plates said they did so spiritually, not physically. We're going to jump on that soon. Signature of the witnesses are the handwriting of Oliver Cowdery. We covered that in 2 episodes ago on that. All witnesses to the plates end up leaving the church, save 2 of the members of the Smith family. However, apologists would point to this as almost making their testimonies more authentic and more credible because they still stood by them after leaving. But he says, how much credibility can we give the testimonies of those that have claimed to see the plates when the records show that it was seen in visions, not physically, as the church teaches? How much trust can we put in the statements of these witnesses when all of them that weren't being financially supported by the church ended up leaving? So we're going to tackle that a little bit, because you could definitely say that the testimony of the 3 witnesses was a vision. However, they did still claim to see the plates in a visionary state. Remember, it was prophesied in the Book of Mormon that they would see it by the power of God, the witnesses. So this comes from C.S. letter. So people believe they could see things as a vision in their mind. They called it second sight. We call it imagination. It made no difference to these people if they saw with their natural eyes or their spiritual eyes, as both were one and the same. As mentioned previously, people believe they could see spirits in their dwelling places in the local hills, along with buried treasure. This supernatural way of seeing the world is also referred to in Doctrine and Covenants as the eyes of our understandings, or like the eyes of their mind. If the plates and the experiences were real and tangible, as 21st century Mormons are allowed to believe, why would the witnesses make the following kind of statements when describing the plates and the experiences? And I'll show those in a minute. But this is sort of like the theory of, I remember Grant Palmer, whenever I first was listening to him and read his book, he talked about second sight, that it was sort of like this visionary mindset of having visions in their mind, that they weren't literally seeing these things, the eyes of their understanding. And he would argue that D&C 76, the vision of Joseph Smith and Sidney Rigdon, what was similar to this as well, that they weren't literally seeing these things, but it was second sight, or the eyes of their mind. This natural versus spiritual eyes. So this comes from Stephen Burnett, and this is something that critics point to a lot. I'm going to just read the quote. So this is secondhand. He claims that he heard Martin Harris say this. So he says, when I came to hear Martin Harris state in public that he never saw the plates with his natural eyes, only in vision or imagination, neither Oliver nor David, and also that the 8 witnesses never saw them and hesitated to sign that instrument for that reason, but were persuaded to do it, the last pedestal gave way. In my view, our foundation was sapped, and the entire superstructure fell in heap of ruins. I therefore, 3 weeks since in the stone chapel, renounced the Book of Mormon, After we were done speaking, Martin Harris arose and said he was sorry for any man who rejected the Book of Mormon, for he knew it was true. He said he had hefted the plates repeatedly in a box with only a tablecloth or a handkerchief over them, but he never saw them, only as he saw a city through a mountain, and said that he never should have told that the testimony of the eight was false if it had not been picked out of him, but should have let it pass by him. So this is, if it's a credible quote, if it's accurate, then you could say that this is quite damning, that the 8 witnesses and 3 witnesses never really actually saw the plates, but in a visionary sense. Now, some apologists would say, how credible is this? Critics would say it is credible, and I believe someone else also writes a similar quote, claiming to hear Martin Harris talk about being more of a spiritual eyes, imaginary second sight viewing of the plates. There's also these quotes that say, I never saw the golden plates, but only in a visionary or entranced state. While praying, I passed into a state of entrancement, and in that state, I saw the angel in the plates. This is Martin Harris. He only saw the plates with a spiritual eye. I saw them with the eye of faith. So there's referring to seeing with a spiritual eye, the eye of faith in a visionary state, which would make you question or wonder, did they literally see these things, or did they just imagine it, or was it a hallucination? Was it all just in their mind? And it does call into question the credibility and reliability of the witnesses' testimonies and the literalness of their experience. C.S. Letter continues to say, if these witnesses literally really saw the plates like everyone else on the planet sees tangible objects, why strange statements like, I never saw them, only as I see a city through a mountain? What does that even mean? I have never seen a city through a mountain, have you? Why all these bizarre statements from the witnesses if the plates were real and the event literal? Why would you need a vision or supernatural power to see real physical plates that Joseph said were in a box that he carried around? When Martin Harris was asked, did you see them with your natural, your bodily eyes, just as you see this pencil case in my hand? Now I say no or yes to this. Martin answered, I did not see them as I do that pencil case, yet I saw them with the eye of faith. I saw them just as distinctly as I see anything around me, though at the time they were covered over with a cloth. So then he's asking, well, why couldn't Martin just say yes? And there's these second or third hand statements that the witnesses, Martin Harris was claiming that it was spiritual eyes, that he, saw them like a city through a mountain. He didn't see them as he sees this pencil before him, but with the eye of faith, making it seem like it wasn't a literal appearance of it, but it was second sight or imagination or hallucination. Now, this is from Fair Latter-day Saints, and this is John A. Clark's interview. So he says, John A. Clark did not interview Martin Harris, but this is a third-hand account. So he was repeating what someone else told him. So the source cited when Martin Harris interviews with John A. Clark from early Mormon documents. So that was one that was sourced a few times. It's not an interview between Clark and Harris, but implied by the title. Clark's actual statement clearly says that he received this information from a gentleman in Palmyra, a professor of religion, who said that he had talked with Harris. This is not an interview between Clark and Harris. So already, if it's third hand, I suppose you have to be a little bit more skeptical or cautious. Obviously, it's more reliable if it's a first hand or second hand statement. Clark's statement appears to include elements from both before and after Harris viewed the plates as a witness. Harris saw them with his eyes when he acted as one of the 3 witnesses, and we'll look at some quotes from Harris where he makes it seem that way. But he only saw them through the eye of faith when they were covered with a cloth prior to his being a witness. Clark's third-hand hostile relation of another hostile source makes no distinction between these events and instead portrays Harris as contradicting himself. When Martin Harris said that he had seen the angel and the plates with his spiritual eyes or with the eye of faith, he may have simply been employing some scriptural language that he was familiar with. Such statements do not mean that the angel and the plates were imaginary, hallucinatory, or just an inner mental image. The earlier accounts of Martin Harris's testimony makes the literal nature of the experience unmistakable. Rather than being hallucinatory or merely spiritual, Martin claimed that the plates and angel were seen by physical eyes that have been enhanced by the power of God to view more objects than a mortal could normally see. So they're stating that it's third hand from the Fair Latter-day Saints. They're also stating that there could be a conflation between when Martin was scribe and held the plates covered in a cloth, but that Martin does testify of seeing the angel and seeing the plates. so that maybe these sources should be treated with some skepticism. Although you could say that there's other handful of sources, like the ones from Stephen Burnett, that he said there that he saw them with spiritualized, that nobody saw them with the actual plates. So you could make that argument that it was just a visionary experience, not really seeing the plates. But then we got to take into account some of the other quotes from Martin Harris. I'm going to come back to those scriptures. These are some I just found from Fair Latter-day Saints of Martin Harris, where he makes it sound actually very literal. So he's asked, this is a quote from Martin Harris. He says, "Gentlemen, do you see that hand? Are you sure you see it? Are your eyes playing a trick or something? No. Well, as sure as you see my hand, so sure did I see the angel and the plates." He also says, "It is not a mere belief, but a matter of knowledge. I saw the plates and the inscriptions thereon. I saw the angel, and he showed them unto me." Well, just as plain as you see that chopping block, I saw the plates, and sooner than I would deny it, I would lay my head upon that chopping block and let you chop it off. I know what I know. I have seen what I have seen, and I have heard what I have heard. I have seen the gold plates. An angel appeared to me, and others. So if you take just the quotes that make Martin Harris say that, oh, it's just a spiritual eyes, all imagination, eye of faith, then you could definitely come to that conclusion. They didn't really see the gold plates. But then when you read through some of these other first, second-hand accounts from Martin Harris, he makes it very clear that he did literally see the gold plates. He saw the angel. He knows he saw, and there's no language of the plates being in a cloth or spiritualized or second sight. So you need to take those in mind. Now, spiritualized in the eyes of faith is scriptural language as well. So Martin emphasized that the vision was also with the natural eye to enable him to testify of it to the world. In 1875, Martin said, "The prophet Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery and David Whitmer and myself went into a grove to pray to obtain a promise that we should behold with our eyes, natural eyes, that we could testify of it to the world." Harris did not then see spiritual eye and natural eye as mutually exclusive categories. Both describe something about the witness's experience. In Moses 1, Moses says of his vision of seeing God, "Mine own eyes have beheld God, not my natural, but my spiritual eyes, for my natural eyes could have not have beheld, for I should have withered and died in his presence, but his glory was upon me, and I beheld his face, and I was transfigured before him." So in this scripture, Moses couldn't have beheld God in his natural state. His natural eyes couldn't have beheld God, but his spirit came upon him, his glory surrounded him, he was transfigured, and he was able to see God with his spiritual eyes, but in the body also. The term eye of faith, as well as in the scripture, this comes from Ether 12. There are many whose faith was so exceedingly strong, even before Christ came, who could not be kept from within the veil, but truly saw with their eyes the things which they have beheld with an eye of faith, and they were glad. So eye of faith and spiritual eyes, you could say, are scriptural. This comes from David Whitmer. So this is in the first person of David Whitmer. He says, and this was in 1887, "In regards to my testimony to the visitation of the angel who declared to us their witness that the Book of Mormon is true, I have this to say. Of course, we are in the spirit when we have the view, for no man can behold the face of an angel except in a spiritual view. But we were in the body also, and everything was as natural to us as it is at any time. Martin Harris, you say, called it being in vision. We read in the scriptures Cornelius saw in a vision an angel of God. Daniel saw an angel in a vision. Also in other places, it states that they saw an angel in the spirit. A bright light enveloped us where we were filled at noonday, and their in a vision, were in spirit. We saw and heard just as it stated in my testimony in the Book of Mormon. They literally were trying to use biblical language to try and explain what they had experienced, this physical and spiritual vision experience." I forgot to put the citation in here, but I got this from Latter-day Saints Q&A. I'll put that in the description. But here, David Whitmer is pretty much saying, well, yeah, we were in the spirit. No man can see an angel without being in the spirit, without it being a visionary experience, being filled with the spirit. But he says that we were in the body also, and it was a natural experience as well, similar to those people in the Bible who claimed visions of seeing angels and such. Could it have been a hallucination? So this is another theory of hallucination. So the three witnesses had the opportunity to disqualify their testimony, but all of them insisted that their vision was literal and unmistakable, but perhaps it was a hallucination. It is claimed that the Book of Mormon witnesses may have been sincere in their testimony, but were actually the victims of hallucination or hypnosis induced in them by Joseph Smith. The three witnesses had the opportunity to qualify their testimony, but all of them insisted that their vision was literal and unmistakable. In addition, they each verified the literalness of the event by stating that their physical ears heard a heavenly voice. Critics twist the historical record in their effort to eliminate the troublesome witnesses, but their testimony cannot be convincingly dismissed. Fairlight says that only 3% of people are capable of experiencing a visual hallucination, and about 9% of the population can hallucinate a voice speaking them while under the influence of hypnosis. So, research by Ernest Hilgard at Stanford found that only 3% of people are capable of experiencing a visual hallucination, so of seeing the angel and the plates, and only 9% of the population could hallucinate a voice speaking to them while under the influence of hypnosis. These statistics just further refute psychological arguments against the validity of the witnesses to the Book of Mormon. So hypnosis it's claimed that the Book of Mormon witnesses may have been sincere in their testimony, but were actually under the victims of hallucination. Now, we covered that quote. Let me just jump to this. It's just a silly question to imply that these 8 men can't look at a physical object with their physical eyes when they looked at something else with their physical eye. According to John Whitmer, none of them ever denied seeing the physical plates with their physical eyes. In the case of the 3 witnesses, some people have suggested that these men may have hallucinated their experience or only seen things with their spiritual eyes, aside from spiritual eyes being scriptural language that they were commanded to use. There's never been documented case in the history of scrying of 2 people hallucinating the same thing at the same time. Now, I will maybe offer a slight pushback there, and I'm going to cover this in my next video, that there are people in other religions who have had multiple witnesses claiming to see things, like the Virgin Mary. I know the Shakers as well. And I even watched a Netflix documentary, what was it called? Unsolved Mysteries. And loads of people claim to see like a UFO and aliens. So I know you can't, I know the argument they're making, but there probably has been cases where numerous witnesses have claimed to see something. But they say it's strange credulity to suggest that these men could do that and hold their testimony of the Book of Mormon after falling away from Joseph and the church. I think as well, I don't think I have a slide in this, but some critics believe that Joseph might have had these unconscious hypnotic powers and had, the power of suggested, and the witnesses were worked up in like a religious fervor. And I know Dan Vogel pointed that they all had sort of like experiences with maybe having a dreamlike vision of the plates or something before. So they were highly suggestible to having a visionary experience. So these men would have been susceptible, which, you can interpret it that way, of course. David Whitmer, this is what he had to say with regards to experiencing maybe a hallucination. So this is this third witness talking about the same kind of thing as he's being interviewed by Joseph Smith III. There's a presence there, Colonel Giles, who is trying to address this hallucination aspect or mental disturbances. So this is something they even thought about at the time. So he asked if it might not have been possible that he, Mr. Whitmer, had been mistaken and had simply been moved upon by some mental disturbance or hallucination, which had deceived them into thinking he saw the personage, the angel, the plates, the Urim and Thummim, and the sword of Laban. How well and distinctly I remembered the manner in which Elder Whitmer rose and drew himself up to his full height, a little over 6 feet, and said in a solemn and impressive tone, "No, sir, I was not under any hallucination, nor was I deceived. I saw with these eyes and heard with these ears. I know whereof I speak." And that's quite a powerful statement. Like, I can understand people thinking that it may have been a hallucination. I'm not saying, I think that's possible, that they may have been in this very religious fervor and perhaps in a trance, and may have just had a hallucinatory visionary experience. But this is the same question David Whitmer was being asked, and that was his response. He was just very adamant that he was not under any hallucination. It wasn't a mental disturbance. It wasn't an imagination. He saw with these eyes. He heard with his ears. He's standing by his testimony. Martin Harris. This quote comes from Fair Latter-day Saints. It says, "Brother Harris, I have brought," this is from Mr. Godfrey. He says, "I have brought these young men to hear your statement as to whether or not you believe the Book of Mormon to be true." His face was turned to the wall. He turned and faced us and said, "I don't believe, but I know it to be true. For these eyes I saw the angel, and with these ears pointing to them, I heard him say it was a true and correct record. of an ancient people that dwelt upon this American continent. Oliver Cowdery was asked, was your testimony based on a dream? Was it imagination of your mind? Was it an illusion? He responded with the exact same qualifying statement as the other two witnesses. My eyes saw, my ears heard, and my understanding was touched, and I know that whereof I testified is true. It was no dream, no vain imagination of the mind. It was real. Oliver Cowdery also said, he wrote in November 1829 a letter to questions about whether it was juggling or trickery or conjuring. It was a clear, open, beautiful day, far from any inhabitants in a remote field. At the time we saw the record of which it has been spoken, it was brought and laid before us by an angel arrayed in glorious light, who descended, I suppose, out of the midst of heaven. If this is human juggling, judge ye. So the critics who resort to this tactic to discredit the witnesses are often secularists. As such, they consider any talk of the spiritual as delusion or imagination, yet their understanding of such terms does not match how Martin and the other witnesses meant them. And I agree, I can understand you being skeptical of the witnesses, thinking maybe it was a hallucination. Like, these are extraordinary supernatural claims, and it's understandable if you're not a believer or if you have lost your faith to have some skepticism and to look at the possible explanations of hallucination or spiritual eyes. But when you look at these statements from the three witnesses, they make it very clear that they do not believe it was a hallucination. They don't believe it was, just in their mind or trickery or Joseph Smith hypnotized them. They are very sure of what they saw, and I think that needs to be taken into account. So there are some quotes from the witnesses, mostly Martin Harris, secondhand, stating he and the other witnesses only saw the plates in a visionary, spiritualized sort of way. I have faith, not literal. Apologists, might debate whether or not these are third hand, if they're reliable or these antagonistic sources. We should focus more on the primary statements, and there's a lot of them that it's very literal viewing of the angel in the plates. The witnesses were sincere in their testimonies and never recanted. They may have been tricked or hypnotized into hallucination, as some critics view, and perhaps you could check out Dan Vogel's interview. He sort of lays out his evidence for why he thinks it was a hallucination. These men were susceptible due to their magical worldview, some critics believe, but however, I think there's little evidence to support this theory of hypnosis or mass hallucination, or that Joseph Smith possess sort of hypnotic powers in a way. And sometimes I think it almost requires a little bit more conjecture to believe that than what if they're just telling the truth. Primary accounts of the three witnesses, their testimonies verify they did see the plates and the angel. It was no hallucination, no dream, no deception or trickery. Apologists view that their seeing with spiritual eyes is a scriptural description and does not make it any less literal or real. Again, you can sort of come to your own conclusion on the witnesses, but really look at both sides. Yes, look at the evidence the critics show, and I've tried to represent that. If you feel like there's things I'm missing or I've not fully represented the critics' argument, then comment underneath. I'm happy to correct and maybe do another video, but I've tried to show sort of the apologetic responses to the claims of spiritual eyes, to the claims of not seeing the plates and it being imagination or hallucination. But I think these quotes should be taken into consideration. But in the next video, we will be looking at sort of other religions and people who have claimed to be witnesses of other things, because I think that should be taken into account as well. And by no means am I trying to prove that this therefore means Joseph Smith was a prophet and the Book of Mormon is true. I still think it requires faith, but I think we shouldn't just dismiss the testimony of the witnesses at face value, but take into account their sincerity and their conviction that they really did see the angel and the gold plates. So if you've enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel, Mormonism with the Murph. Comment underneath what you think about it as well. Any feedback or any responses, I want to take that into account as well. And in the next video, we'll be looking at witnesses in other religions who claim to see things as well. So thanks so much for watching. Take care, everyone. See you in the next one. Bye.